Hello everyone. If you were a Pokemon trainer, what would your team be? It's a simple question, until it isn't. Said topic has been debated in playgrounds and online forums for nearly 3 decades now, but I'm here to tell you all that despite playing Pokemon since 2005, I didn't genuinely ponder this question until 2022. I had a vague inkling to be sure, but a definitive squad of 6 was something that I had seldom thought about, and so I sought to change that. I consulted Bulbapedia from top to bottom, going region to region to determine my favorites from each game. Since 2018, I had been replaying every game I owned, making a point to use Pokemon I never utilized before. Some blew me away, others not so much. As I was a determined sort, these Pokemon were also going to be shiny. Soon enough though, I ran into the ultimate hurdle: indecision. At this point, there were over 1,000 Pokemon, and although I had only used a fraction of that number, whittling it down to a mere 6 was proving to be quite the challenge. I had a first draft, and then a second, and then 7 more. Things got so bad that at one point I had Spiritomb slated for the team, a Pokemon I hadn't even used yet, and one that I was solely contemplating due to its awesome shiny. Eventually, though, it all clicked together. By accessing my very memories and archival footage of playthroughs past, I had finally formulated my epic team of 6. The next stage of the operation was actually acquiring these beasties. Via the Masuda method, RNG manipulation, and even arbitrary code execution, I had obtained these pocket monsters after a month of concerted effort. If any part of what I just said made absolutely no sense to you, then fret not. I made an entire video that serves as context for those exact technical details. Do be warned though, things get a bit weird. As this was going to be my proper official team, I wanted to use them in the field. Sure, I could simply trade them to my Scarlet save, pump them full of EXP candies, and have a full team of level 100s in a single afternoon. But what's the point of that? In all my years of playing Pokemon, I've found that the best way to build memories and connections about specific, individual Pokemon is to simply use them in a standard playthrough. Shocking stuff, I know. The final obstacle of this plot was deciding which game to use them in, and simply put, it had to be one with the walking Pokemon feature. Just this one addition alone elevates any game, and makes interacting with the titular critters a whole lot more immersive. Out of every game to have this attribute, it came down to Heart Gold and Soul Silver or Scarlet and Violet. And well, despite the fact that Heart Gold and Soul Silver revolutionized the concept way back in 2009, no other game has done it anywhere near as good since then. With the exception of the Let's Go games, that is, but those only have the original 151 plus Meltan, so they're automatically disqualified. I ended up going with Soul Silver, as I had exclusively played Heart Gold many times before, and wanted to shake things up a little. Everything that I'm about to show you was done 1 year ago. I have gradually built up this channel since then in preparation of showcasing this very playthrough. When I initially played this game back in the summer of 2024, I presented it at, of all places, Facebook. That's right, folks. Underneath the litany of minion memes and AI-generated garbage, there are actual thriving communities here. That first rendition was told primarily through screenshots, but I recorded the entire thing so that I could one day make it into a genuine video. Before I overview the team I used, I must preface, 2 of these 6 Pokemon are a special case in that they are not going to be a part of my official Pokemon team. This is because the 2 that will be were introduced to the series way after Generation 4. I will explain why those 2 are on my team once we get to them, but just know that unfortunately, Jetstream the Kartana and Castle Bravo the Tinkaton are gonna have to sit this one out. Both of those Pokemon have already gone on adventures of their own, so the using them in a playthrough aspect has already been fulfilled. Alright, I've beaten around the bush long enough. It's time we finally talk about the squad. First up is La Pollo the Torchic. Before every Spanish speaker eviscerates me on the atomic level, please, let me explain. When I initially sought to acquire a Torchic, I was going to have its nickname be El Pollo. However, as I wanted a female for the extra flex, this name would have to be changed to its appropriate equivalent. Instead of doing the sensible thing and consulting a proper Spanish dictionary, I sought the advice of a fluent community member, who cheekily suggested that I use the name Lap. If you hadn't guessed from my censoring of that name, Lap is not too dissimilar from some English slang. Thankfully, I caught on to this ruse, and made the big brain decision to only change the first word of the name, thinking, nah, it'll be fine, not comprehending the grave sin I was committing. Never mind the fact that La Gallina was right there for the taking. With that being said, several Spanish speakers following this run actually liked the grammatically incorrect name, so who knows, maybe I'll leave a potential name change up to a future poll. Anyway, Torchic is my favorite starter, so of course it was going to be on this team. Next up is Occam's the Sneasel. Weavile is my favorite Pokemon ever, so this addition was a no-brainer. To complete the nickname set, I do have a second Sneasel named Razor, but the usage of said critter is slated for a later date. With Razor Claw not being available until the Battle Frontier, we're going to be lugging around this sinister weasel for quite some time. This is no issue, as I usually don't end up evolving any Sneasel I use until roughly level 40. Afterwards is Mizuchi the Magikarp. Gyarados was on my first ever Pokemon team, and I have intermittently used one ever since. It is an unsung hero of sorts, consistently putting in exceptional work every time I've used it. Getting Magikarp to level 20, the old-fashioned way mind you, is going to be quite the task, but it will be well worth it. Side note, but this particular Magikarp is specifically the one you get from the salesman on Route 4. I don't know, it's kind of funny to imagine a scammer accidentally selling the Holy Grail, and the regular Pokeball lines up with Gyarados' shiny quite well. Next is Damascus the Gibble. Garchomp is one of those Pokemon that I use, fall in love with, don't use, forget why I liked it to begin with, and then use it all over again. By having one on this team, I am hoping to break that cycle. It is my favorite pseudo-legendary of all time. My goodness, I don't even know where to begin with this Landshark. And with the exception of Metagross, no other pseudo comes close. Most fortuitously, this line isn't completely useless until a final Evo, which cannot be said about other pseudos. Next up is our first special case. You see, with Kartana and Tinkaton in future generations, my priority for these slots shifted from Pokemon I want in my squad to Pokemon that I absolutely want to transfer up to the future. I have several that I need sent to the present eventually, but there were two at the top of that list, Gardevoir and Snorlax. I was indecisive, so I left it up to a poll. To my utter disbelief, the Thick King won out over the Glamour Girl. For reasons that will become apparent the further we go, Snorlax winning this poll was a substantial domino. Whenever I play a new game, I tend to have one experimental Pokemon on the team. Mukbang the Snorlax is as experimental as it gets. Behold, the Kamikaze Roulette set. The strategy is simple. Mukbang goes in, uses Metronome, and ideally something absurd happens. Once Mukbang's health hits yellow, use Rest. Afterwards, use Sleep Talk. It was my initial idea to have Sleep Talk use either Metronome or Self-Destruct, but guess what? Sleep Talk will never use Metronome. I didn't know that when I first made this set, but simply put, the roulette at play is if Mukbang does absolutely nothing of benefit or explodes in a glorious display. Lastly, and bear with me on this one, we have Lanius the Giratina. Put those pitchforks down, let me explain. I haven't used a legendary in a playthrough since Yveltal way back in Y. Why would I? You usually don't get one until the end game, and by then, what's the point? Well, what if I told you that Heart Gold and Soul Silver has the single greatest event in franchise history, the Sinjo Ruins event. With this, you can receive a level 1 Creation Trio Legendary extremely early in the game, tailor-made for you to use on your journey. If there was any legendary that I'd be justified in using, it's one from this event. I don't think I need to tell you how important Giratina is to me. It is my favorite legendary. I know some folks are apprehensive at using legendaries in standard playthroughs, but in my case, this will be the only time I ever use one in a manner such as this. Lanius will primarily be in the back slot of my team, only coming out against super effective gyms and regular trainers. With the exception of one incident early on, this is the case throughout the entire playthrough. And then there's also... to test his mettle, Lanius will be destroying every single legendary that can be encountered in the game. With a twist, but we'll get to that later. And there you have it, my team of 6 for this game. I should tell you all that I'm not playing this for any wild challenge. I have a Giratina for crying out loud, but there will be some minor self-imposed rules. No usable items of any kind in a battle, Giratina in the back slot unless certain prerequisites are made, no trading in any items or TMs. Obviously I'm not doing Nuzlocke rules here, but hey, feel free to make fun of me if I fumble and have a Pokemon faint as a result. I've done this for my own personal enjoyment, and I hope you have fun along the way. Finally, when I recorded this playthrough, I only recorded the top screen and not the bottom. You're not exactly missing out on a lot, and I did have some foresight later on to switch to the bottom for some visuals, but yeah, we full screened for most of this. With over 9 minutes of backstory out of the way, oh my god, let us begin. Our journey starts in New Bark Town, and although I may levy some minor criticism to the region later down the line, the opening town is perfect. It is here where we meet our mother, and let me just say there's a very good reason why she's mother and not mom. After getting absolutely launched by a crimson-haired delinquent, we enter the lab of one Professor Elm, who, as was evident by Oak stealing his spotlight instantly, is a man who was set up for failure. Nevertheless, he offers us the choice of 3 Pokemon. If this were a normal playthrough, I'd choose the best water starter, but I'll be using Cyndaquil for the time being. Let's face it, this edgelord with a Chikorita just wouldn't hit the same. We are tasked with meeting a Mr. Pokemon, but before we can head out in earnest, we are interrupted by Lyra, the biggest downgrade in franchise history until Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Route 29 always strikes me as rather imposing, but we clear it with little issue. Entering the simply beautiful Cherry Grove City, an old man promptly accosts us. He gives us running shoes though, which is a far better gift from the elderly than the old man in Kanto, who merely gave me secondhand embarrassment. Come Route 30, and Cyndaquil thankfully isn't poisoned by the horde of Weedle occupying the area. We locate Mr. Pokemon's abode and are promptly given the task of courier, but not before witnessing quite possibly the most blatant act of brown-nosing this side of Mount Silver. I mean really, was this necessary? The man is 5 feet away from you. One step out the door and a frantic phone call grates our ears, as Professor Elm's crippling lack of depth perception has come back to bite him. Racing back, and the prior rowdy youth is barreling down the road, and issues a challenge. We accept, and Cyndaquil immediately locks in by missing his first attack. Totodile keeps leering though, and is vanquished after far too close a battle. Our new rival accidentally drops his social security card, and after a shoddy bout of detective work, a name must be divulged to the authorities. After seeing such a brazen disregard for the rule of law, I knew just what to call this miscreant. Professor Elm gets over his robbery rather quickly, and then suggests that we take on the gym challenge. An excellent idea indeed, but it won't be with this combustible rodent. Thankfully, we can rather quickly trade in the actual team. We just need to be wary about over-leveling them before certain gyms. I couldn't resist the temptation to use Lanius first, and who is more worthy a foe than a certain youngster Joey and his top percentage Rattata? I must admit, gazing upon this sight and confidently claiming that I look weak is aura farming at its finest. Unfortunately. It is here that the adage, "not all following sprites are created equally," is most evident. In an unintentionally cruel moment, Lyra stalls my entry into Violet City, as Lapoyo is actively suffering from poison. Said settlement is charming, but before we can face its gym, we'll have to clear Bellsprout Tower. It is here where Mukbang is fielded for the first time, and what a first showing it was. I want you to guess the first move that Metronome selects. Do you have your answer? Wrong. Psycho Boost. As if on a pendulum, he follows this up with a useless Endeavor and then an equally miffing Stealth Rock. However, he then boldly taunts his own teammate Lanius by stealing his signature move. That's 2 legendary exclusive moves out the gate. Ascending the tower further, and the team is holding its own pretty well. Mukbang continues to impress, with Brave Bird, Fire Blast, and a critical Shadow Sneak being good signs. The final level of the tower is where things start to get complicated. Lapoyo enacts a Scratchathon, while Lanius's ominous wind is merely inhaled by the enemy. We look on as Serbia disregards sound advice before demanifesting, and commence a battle with Elder Lee. That is simply resolved by Lapoyo channeling her inner game foul. We can now challenge Violet City's gym, and in doing so we meet an absolute king. Occams easily cleaves through the first trainer, but the next battle, with Mukbang at the helm, is anything but. He raises his defense, hits a hidden power, and expertly goes for Yawn. The issue is that Pidgey keeps using Sand Attack. I swap back to Mizuchi to clear the lowered accuracy, but Mukbang is hit yet again. It is then that he says, "Screw self-destruct, I want the big boom boom," only to miss explosion. Our first sacrificial feint of the run, and not only was it not self-destruct, but it didn't even smite the target. Regardless, we strut up to Faulkner with confidence, and wouldn't you know it, he also uses Sand Attack. Mukbang gets some decent damage in, and then uses Swords Dance, good stuff, before tossing his Pidgey. Up comes Pidgeotto, and on a mere 2 HP, we are forced into a roulette cycle for the first time. We get a bad roll to start, and then another bad roll, and then we wake up prematurely. We're thrown back into the cycle yet again, and this time he goes for self-destruct. Hegel remarks somewhere that all great world historic facts and personages appear, so to speak, twice. He forgot to add, the first time as tragedy, the second time as farce. With Mukbang having fumbled his second sacrifice in a row, I overreacted a little and instantly sent in Lanius. I'm not proud of it. This is in fact the sole exception I mentioned at the start, but even with our ghastly behemoth in the fray, Faulkner's frequent usage of Roost dragged this battle out much longer than it need be. With the Zephyr badge in our possession, we can breathe a little bit, as every traded Pokemon up to level 20 will now obey us. We receive yet another phone call from Professor Elm, the subject of which is the prior egg we delivered to him. I have used the Togepi line before and thoroughly enjoyed it, but all this grandstanding about its importance, especially from this kimono girl, make it all the more brutal when I deposit it in my PC forever. Route 32 gives way to a smorgasbord of wild Pokemon and trainers alike, with Mukbang using a third legendary move along the way. Lapoyo finally gains decent stab in the form of Ember, and a shady individual offers the sale of a Slowpoke tail. Side note, but I love that Gen 8 straight up gives you the option to put a black market item in your curry. Union Cave is soundly cleared via Lanius, though the perpetually raining Route 33 is a welcome sight. On the outskirts of Azalea Town, we witness a cheeky reference to Sinnoh. As for Azalea Town itself, I absolutely love the Kindlewood aesthetic. If I were to live in any town in Johto, it'd be here. In this cozy village, we meet Kurt, the man single-handedly responsible for the dual tediums of the Cramomatic and item printer. I can't talk too much trash, though, as he boldly vows to destroy the Mafia by himself. Unfortunately for Kurt, he isn't 10 years old, and promptly breaks his back. In our first battle with Team Rocket, Lanius continues his trend of frying Rattata, though he evidently cares not for the rescue mission at hand, actively dispatching one of the Slowpoke along the way. During this raid, we face off against Team Rocket's residential pretty boy. This battle is positively noxious, with Lapoyo confused and poisoned, but nevertheless powering through to secure the W. Proton leaves with an ominous warning, while Kurt takes us back to his residence, in yet another instance of Lapoyo's suffering being prolonged. It is time for the next gym challenge, and with Ember at the ready, I'm quite confident. Indeed, Lapoyo fries much of the opposition. I'm no expert, but something tells me a gaping crevice in the floor of your establishment is not OSHA approved. Our first double battle of the run sees Occam's and Mukbang team together, with the latter actually providing valuable support. Not content in a passive role, he promptly throws a 4-time super effective critical hit out along the way. The battle against Bugsy is Lapoyo's time to shine, with both my Flaming Burb and his Scyther going for focus energy. A 4-time super effective Rock Tomb only does half damage, while his quick attack brings Lapoyo down to yellow. However, the subsequent Rock Tomb is thankfully a crit. The rest of his oddly unevolved team is promptly incinerated. It was this battle that secured for Lapoyo a place in my heart. With the Hive badge, our obedience worries are postponed for the time being. Before we can make our way into Ilex Forest, a certain Balkaner halts us. He sends out the one Pokemon he shouldn't have before using Supersonic, which, to pause for just a moment, I'll remind you, this playthrough was recorded back in 2014, and well, call me Nostradamus on this one. His Croconaw, despite landing 2 scary faces, is still outsped by Occam's, who then levels up twice in one action.
Nice.
Serbia drops a kernel of geopolitical insight before departing into the aforementioned forest, which, mind you, is currently blocked off by a tree, so where did he go? We need to round up a few Farfetch'd before we can go further, which is easier said than done when you have what amounts to an eldritch elephant blundering behind you. Our reward is cut, which I grant to Occam's for now, while youngster Joey calls us for the first time. Further in, and we encounter the best early move tutor, a man who couldn't go pro, but is determined to acquire CTE regardless. He offers us Headbutt, which I promptly teach to half the squad. We encounter another kimono girl in dire need of a GPS, and to my utter disbelief, the legate himself knows the way. One meager battle later in our first evolution of the run is Lapoyo. Combuskin may look a little, but its cry is one of my all-time favorites. Before I can properly marvel at my new kickin' chicken, youngster Joey calls me again, okay dude Jill. More importantly, I can actually use Damascus now, and his lack of prior locomotion has obviously gotten to him. Our first battle with this terrestrial pup goes quite well, as Damascus elects to pull an invincible Season 3 finale and headbutt repeatedly. We take a brief moment to gaze upon the night sky, while Mizuchi gets to enjoy water for the first time. All that hydration jazzed her up, and I decided decide, hey, why not? She knows tackle now, let's have a direct battle. The ensuing battle versus a single wild Drowsy took 4 minutes. Further up the road is the daycare center staffed by Lyra's grandparents. My condolences. And further still, we scare the absolute daylights out of some poor night guard. If you saw this meme last year, and believe me, it did some crazy numbers, then yeah, that was your boy. Entering Goldenrod City, and there is much to do here. I stock up on needed supplies and locate the game corner, a place we are going to be quite well acquainted with, believe me. We receive a nifty new mode of transport and come across a relic from a bygone era. I never got to experience the DS era of games online personally, so I can only imagine how fascinating it must have been to enjoy this properly. Whilst traversing the train station, Joey calls us for the 3rd time, but I can't be mad, because he does the thing. All that remains now is gym number 3, and we know all too well what waits for us at the end of it. Damascus's Dragon Rage deletes everything in its path, while Lapoyo similarly kicks a gaggle of Jigglypuff into a pulp. Of course, we all know Whitney's wickedness, but I've got a trick up my sleeve. He starts off by imitating his avian compatriot before using Spatial Rend? Okay. He goes for a pitiful Bug Buzz that prompts a potion before double dipping Deoxys' move pool with another Psycho Boost. Whitney thought she was slick attempting to yoink that move for herself, while Mukbang is now the one lowering accuracy. He then uses Seed Flare for the 2nd time now before taking Clefairy out with a payback. In comes the dreaded Heifer, ensnaring Mukbang with her bovine charms. He powers through with a frankly pathetic uproar and manages to rest before Stomp does too much damage. He then flinches, not good, before sleep-talking into self-destruct, which finally hits. Good job, son. It couldn't have happened to a more deserving menace, and said terror immediately throws a hissy fit. All the while, Damascus catches a whiff of what I can only assume to be smoking, detonated flesh. Whitney calms down long enough to give us the plain badge, and the receptionist up front says something rather sus if I do say so myself. Upon his resurrection, Mukbang stretches out his reattached everything in a process that I can only assume to be reminiscent of Battle Tendency Strizo. Route 35 is a true trainer gauntlet, however it is also where we meet an unsung Giga Chad, Cameron the photographer, one of the few miscellaneous NPCs from any Pokemon game that I know by name. Although I've been ignoring her calls for quite some time, I pick up the phone for Mother this time around, if only to remind myself of the horror awaiting me. On this trail we meet Juggler Irwin, who, aside from the fact that he's boldly rocking a level 2 Voltorb, plays an invaluably esoteric role in this playthrough later down the line. Further north is the opulent Pokeathlon Dome, one of the many new additions to the remakes and just an awesome idea if I'm being honest. I was never really good at the games here, but the vibe in of itself is worth the trip. Continuing on to National Park, and I've got no jokes on this one either. The music, the atmosphere, Cameron the photographer, this place has it all. It is positively serene, and hits me with nostalgia every time I waltz through it. Though I should say that seeing this interaction pre-fairy type melted my brain for a moment there. Lanius acquires Shadow Sneak here, while we pick up the TM for Dig, which I decide to give Occams for coverage. Route 36 is where a certain conifer copycat dwells, and where I hatch a bold plan. Mizuchi is very close to evolving, and Drowsy shenanigans aside, she's seldom had a proper battle up to this point, so I figure, okay, let's have Lapoyo soften up Sudowoodo for our goldfish to tackle. This plan falls apart completely once Sudowoodo goes for Flail, utterly obliterating Mizuchi in a single hit. That is 100% on me, I did not anticipate that. One decidedly less epic battle later, and we finally get the juggernaut that is Gyarados. Up the road, we run into a psychic armed with Drowsy, who makes a cataclysmic lapse in judgment by using hypnosis. I mean really, do I have to say it? He went for it without hesitation. The absolute mad lad. We enter Ecruteak in good spirits, but this jovial sensation is soon replaced by dread. Mother has been calling my Pokegear a lot, and I am distressed to report that her purchases leave much to be desired. Entering the burned tower, aside from the 3 things down below, we meet Eusine, a man with an unhealthy obsession and a curious fashion sense. To the side is gym leader Morty, who actually has a quality fit if I do say so myself. Adding to the clutter is Serbia, who boldly decides to initiate a battle in a condemned multi-story building. His Ghastly is once again one-shot, but he pivots to Magnemite. I in turn switch to Damascus, who consumes the incoming Thunder Wave like an appetizer. In a surprise development, Serbia manages to bring down the stealth aircraft that is Damascus. Although a Pyrrhic victory, something tells me that he'll be holding it over my head forevermore. In a huff, he declares that I'll never catch a legendary, which is true. I merely got the deity of all creation to build one for me instead. We descend down the ladder with Lanius in tow, only for his quarry to escape in fear. Yusin keeps gushing about Suicune, and until Kieran in Gen 9, this dude was definitely the weirdest Pokestalker. We rock up to Ekratique's trippy gym, and although Lanius won't be facing Morty, his underlings aren't so lucky. Mizuchi gets some spectral nibbles in, and we test out the dreaded Sandville strat with Damascus for the first time. I've personally never done this before, but if it's good enough to get banned by Smogan, then it's good enough for me. We make it to Morty, and Occams gets to revel in the glory of the physical special split, as, believe me, no Dark type could pull this off in Gen 2. His Gengar does inflict some nasty damage though, which is patched up via Shell Bell. Why he has a gang of Haunter and no Mischievous, despite said Pokemon being the sole Ghost Edition in Johto, I can't say. With the Fog badge, the risk of disobedience is now moot. We're now halfway through the gym challenge, and I opted to take a break by visiting the game corner as a treat. To be honest with you all, whenever I played Heart Gold in the past, I'd usually stop by here once, marvel at the novelty of it, and then never return. Not this time around. I was determined to learn the ins and outs of this daunting game. To that end, I would like to thank this guide for teaching me what I needed to know in a quick and concise manner. With my emotional support Gibble by my side, I scored a few easy wins and left happy. I will return, as there are several high-ticket items that I want to get from this place, but it was a nice, brief respite from the main story. Back in Ekratique, we are notified of a ruckus in the dance theater by a concerned bystander. We enter, and are mortified to see a Team Rocket grunt getting his schmoove on. We intervene to prevent him from losing subscriber, but the damage is done. As thanks, we are given the HM for Surf. At this point, we actually have a fair and rare bit of autonomy. We can either go east towards Mahogany Town or go west to Olivine City. Both areas are similarly leveled, so it's not like Scarlet and Violet where they say you can go in any order, only for my Sprigatito to get annihilated by a level 40 Cetitan. I briefly entertained the idea of going through Mount Mortar first, but a rough encounter with a hiker sours the idea. Route 38 is a good source of EXP, with most Pokemon ground up in short order. However, a brief spat occurs between Lanius and I, as he outright refuses to hand over whatever mystery item is in his possession. He channels this animosity into blasting away a trio of Doduo, and then immediately after, gives me the item he's holding. I'm not saying the Legate is bipolar or anything, perhaps he just needed some carnage to get his mood up. A few steps into Route 39, and we meet a rather strange fellow by the name of Bauba. He gives us exclusive rights to seeing the new Safari Zone that I'm sure won't be a source of controversy whatsoever. Mukbang uses a move that I have never seen before, and we come across a farm in a dilemma. Their Miltank is unwell. The good Samaritan that I am, I help in what way I can. Getting to use Mizuchi as Gyarados is immensely gratifying, as she tears through the rest of the trainers on this route. We enter the simply scenic Olivine City, but before I can bask in its beauty, Serbia gives me a heart attack. He doesn't battle us, but straight up says that sick Pokemon should be let go, which I do not remember him ever saying. It's taken us this long, but Mother finally clutches up and gives us a useful item for once. Silk Scarf-powered Mukbang is going to be a monster. We enter Olivine's lighthouse and practice some more with the Sandville strat. I effortlessly survive an abrupt plummet from this 4th floor, yes, 4th floor window, and to celebrate, Lapoyo and I gaze upon this immaculate sunset. I'm glad she got to enjoy such a sight, because immediately after we face off against a bird keeper that gets her health down to 1. No big deal, let me just switch out real quick. Oh, I can't even be mad. That's a big brain move if I've ever seen one. We make it to the top of the lighthouse, and there must be something in the water of Olivine, because this is the second Pokemon now that is battling a grave illness. Jasmine sends us on a fetch quest, with Mizuchi being our mode of transport in this endeavor. We're barely in Route 40 proper when Damascus gloriously evolves into the best mid-stage pseudo by an absolute mile. Being Johto's only real ocean area, it should come as no surprise that there's a metric ton of swimmers on the path. I'm not having Hoenn flashbacks by any means, but the entire squad does see some action on this voyage. Landing in Cyanwood, our first course of action is to use some stranger's camera for a group photo. We then receive the secret potion, no space, that's interesting, before Suicune once again runs away at the sight of Lanius. Yucine is of course hot on the trail and demands a battle. His drowsy is no issue whatsoever, but his accursed haunter paralyzes Lanius after pulling a Bruno Bucciarati. His electrode then proceeds to land every single thunder it flings at us, coming the closest to fainting Lanius out of any foe thus far. Up next is Cyanwood's gym, and you'd be forgiven for assuming it's a water type affair. Its leader, Chuck, is evidently unbothered and moisturized, and will have to end his shower before we can face him. Most of the gym is easy pickings, but one incident does put the fear of Arceus into me. Lapoyo is struck by 2 screeches and lands a critical hit on a Primeape, which triggers the single scariest stat boost I have ever seen. In this state, any physical move he uses against Lapoyo is essentially a +10, so I swap out to Mizuchi and then Damascus, who thankfully outspeeds. After besting Chuck via facts and logic, we must also surpass him in battle. His Primeape boosts its evasion and then hurls a rock slide. Mizuchi trounces this threat, and even gets a crit on the incoming Poliwrath. Some of its health is restored thanks to a citrus berry, and it in turn misses Hypnosis. Not knowing how much damage Strength will do with no crit, we go for an itty-bitty nibble to avoid a potential potion, but get paralyzed in the process. I'm committed to the plan, and so is Mizuchi as she perseveres to blast Poliwrath with Dragon Rage. The Storm Badge secured, we can now use Fly, with said HM gifted to us by Chuck's wife, and then taught to Lanius. We ascend in glorious fashion, celebrating this newfound power with some Voltorb flip. Luck is against us though, so we leave short-handed upon remembering that we had to deliver some life-saving medicine or whatever. Back at the lighthouse, Damascus has his first big boy crush, and Amphi, upon being rejuvenated, promptly blesses everyone in the room with cataracts. Disoriented, we are called by Baoba, notifying us that the new Safari Zone is open. Everything west of Cyanwood is fascinating to me, as this area didn't exist in the original games. It's not Sevi Island's level of crazy, but it's still awesome. Lanius, despite having wings and knowing Fly, is apparently scared of heights. At the top, we face off against an ace trainer duo, with Lanius and Mukbang teamed together. Mukbang understands the assignment and rolls Dark Void. Okay, I think we can safely say that he has gone from clown to chef. Shortly afterwards, we finally get the first proper setup move for the squad in Bulk Up. The Safari Gate Bazaar is reached, and I just love the personality on display here. It reminds me of the Slateport Market in spite of its modest size. We enter the zone itself, and Baoba is waiting for us. He offers us a test of ostensible importance, and upon fulfilling its objective, he teases us by pulling an actually, and forcing us to wait. We therefore circle back to Olivine's gym and face no regular trainers, only praise for saving Amphi. If you ask me, you don't need a fancy smancy elixir to heal said Ampharos. A knight in goldenrod would do the trick if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, the battle with Jasmine goes exceptionally well. Lapoyo deletes her 2 Magnemite and starts sitting up after she sends in Steelix. It lands a Screech, but misses its next 2 as we boost all the way up to +6. Even with such strength, that monster defense stat serves her well, and it takes Lapoyo another double kick to bring it down. We receive the mineral badge from Jasmine, but her departing good luck is most appreciated. Thank you, I needed that for real. With Western Johto properly sifted through, we begin the eastern swing through Mount Mortar. It is quite windy, not unlike Mount Coronet, and the many nooks and crannies keep us occupied for quite some time. During this foray, Lanius upgrades from Dragon Breath to Dragon Claw, which he puts to immediate use. The outside area is a bit more spacious, and we encounter Suicune yet again, disturbingly closely followed by Yucine. Alright man, I'm sorry bro, but this is too much. We enter the sleepy burrow that is Mahogany Town. Never mind, apparently ninjas live here, okay. Thankfully, the shop here is up to code, though the items they sell here are definitely on the alternative side of things. It's north in Route 43 when I notice something troubling about Mukbang. Well, it seems that the no less than 4 self-induced ignitions that he has experienced thus far have started to affect him. He recomposes himself by using Regigigas' signature move, before locking on and using Seed Flare for the 3rd time. Dude, your special attack is garbage. Please, cease this buffoonery. I make the mistake of walking through this route's terminal, and am promptly highwaymanned by a duo of Team Rocket grunts. I was impartial to your mayhem before this. Now, I am emotionally and financially invested in your defeat. Arriving at the Lake of Rage, Mizuchi is aptly furious, and how couldn't she? There be a doppelganger in that there lagoon, and as we all know, there can only be one. The two duke it out in brutal fashion, ending in a Dragon Rage exchange that sees Mizuchi victorious over this would-be usurper. The literal takeaway from this engagement is the red scale, which means that we can finally get the EXP share. This chiefly pertains to Mukbang, as any EXP potentially lost via self-destruct can now be salvaged. On land, we meet residential madman Lance. If I hadn't been dealing with a prior redhead with anime hair, I'd be shocked at such a man. He enlists us in investigating the purported source of the red Gyarados, and we return to Mahogany Town's dispensary. Alright, let me just say this. Everyone waxes poetic about Cynthia. I'm personally privy to the Hone Chad Steven Stone, but put some respect on Lance's name. Ordering your illegally underleveled Dragonite to Hyper Beam a shop clerk is crazy work, and is a wild moment that no other champion can claim as their own. Team Rocket's HQ offers a valuable bit of grinding, as although I could disable the alarms that summon 2 grunts every time, I'd much rather harvest this valuable source of EXP. This extends to the easily avoidable traps as well, where the coughing are all too eager to emulate Mukbang. With that being said, there is a moment where I grow too confident and Mizuchi is nearly fried as a result. Lance uses his healing expertise, and believe me, he's quite experienced in that regard. The door to the energy grid requires a voice-activated password, and unfortunately, Team Rocket has 2-factor authentication on, as we'll need an extra password to advance further. We check out their gaming setup before doing battle with a grunt who ends up disclosing the required password. We then face off against an evil scientist armed with a Ditto, and an idea enters my brain. I suppose this counts as Lanius' first legendary battle, even if it is a mere mirror match. Before we can unlock the boss's door, Serbia stops us. Apparently, he was brazen enough to challenge Lance with his current squad, and although I lament his lack of intellect in such a course of action, I respect the confidence. Entering the boss's room, and we are evidently unimpressed with Petrel's cheap cosplay. Upset, he engages us in combat, with Damascus going for the good old Sandville plot. Unfortunately, Zubat confuses him, and Damascus ends up hitting himself 3 times in a row. Some middling health is restored, as his coughing goes for self-destruct, but Damascus dodged it like he's a Pidgey in the Violet City gym. Petrel confidently proclaims that we'll never unlock the radio room. Perhaps that'd be true if he hadn't stupidly uttered the password near the nefarious crow. We chase this yammering warbler all the way to the door, and upon its opening are halted by Giovanni's waifu. Although I am positive that I could handle this 2v1 on my own, Lance tags in with his level 40 Dragonite. This man clearly has an action replay. For most of the battle, Mukbang is basically goofing off while Lance does the work, though he pulls an Earthquake out at the end to secure a win. Executive Ariana leaves with a foreboding claim, while Lance surveys the power source. It turns out that 6 Electrode are powering everything, and Lance says that we must, faint them, which... well, something tells me what we're actually doing is far more permanent. The trio of Jigglypuff as seen from above are mercied swiftly, and Lance gifts us the Whirlpool HM for our contribution to this dark deed. We then have a heart-to-heart about the gym challenge, which is admittedly more personable than Cynthia talking about legends or Steven prattling on about his rock collection. Mahogany Town's gym is our next target, and out of any Pokemon Lanius has faced thus far, a random Swinub proves to be the most stubborn. Mizuchi tears up the ice rink, and the trainers further into the gym proved to be quite daunting. However, my greatest threat, as is the case with most ice gyms I face, is the gym puzzle. We finally reach Price and are given a chilly reception, only rivaled by the very Pokemon he utilizes. It is here that I learn Seal is a pure water type, and with Hail, the Shell Bell, and Rest, this is shaping up to be a battle of attrition. We get a bulk up off, and a lucky crit rids us of Seal for good. His Dugong fares worse, but his Piloswine is surprisingly tanky. Lapoyo is hit super effectively and has her accuracy lowered, but manages to connect her kicks to pull that pork. We receive the Glacier badge and can now use Whirlpool. Price sounds off with some touching words, thank you man, I hope so. As we exit the gym, Professor Elm reminds us of his existence with another concerned phone call. I tune in on the Poke Radio to my favorite jams, only for the broadcast to get max headroomed. We return to Goldenrod, a city under siege. Team Rocket prowls the streets, and the sole officer on duty is more concerned with getting the trains running anything than halting a gang takeover. Distressed, I flee to the one place that I know is safe, if only to plan out my next course of action carefully. Down in the underground, we get to don the uniform of Team Rocket. Getting to live out the fantasy of joining their ranks is surreal, and although this isn't a permanent option for obvious reasons, it's still pretty cool to see everyone's reaction to you. I am especially impressed that every single NPC in the department store has something to say about your new look. The radio tower is a tense situation. The staff are scared, while the grunts are chomping at the bit. Adding to this powder keg is Serbia, who decides to blow my cover and make this infiltration job infinitely tougher. A horde of rocket grunts is now our burden to bear. Behold, the funniest interaction of the entire game. Okay, so you know how the earlier gens reused some Pokemon's cries at different pitches? Well, I personally never saw it myself until this battle. Take a listen, folks. Neat. It is during this same kerfuffle that Mizuchi picks up an incredibly useful move in Ice Fang. Once we reach the director's studio, it is revealed that it is merely Petrel attempting another impersonation. Wielding a team of 5 coughing and 1 wheezing, this battle was annoying but manageable. Petrel tells us where the real director is kept and even gives us the required key. In the middle of this high-stakes operation, Baoba calls to notify me that test number 2 is ready. Delving into Goldenrod's underground, we are interrupted by yet another kimono girl. I haven't brought attention to it yet, but this twirl they do after every conversation is the definition of extra. The basement is crawling with grunts, though they're the least of our worries as Serbia is back with a vengeance. His Golbat tanks several rock tombs, and then he checks Lapoya with Feraligatr. I in turn swap to Mizuchi, and a physical back and forth ensues. We get a crit, nice, and in comes Magnemite. I fatefully switch to Occam's and am immediately punished with paralysis. Our pink Mustelid is summarily barraged with a flurry of sonic attacks. Not beating the allegations on that one, and Occam's goes down after a confusion hit. His Magnemite continues to torment Damascus just the same, before finally falling. He sends in his own damn Sneasel, and we are forced to bring in Mukbang. He starts with a useless Psych Up before pulling out a Flare Blitz to incinerate his foe. At this point, nearly the entire squad has seen action in this one battle alone, so I say screw it and bring in Lanius to round things out. That was a genuinely strenuous clash, so good job, Serbia. We clear out the rest of the area and solve the door puzzle, pushing further and further into storage, until we find the director. Apparently, Team Rocket didn't think it prudent to frisk this man for anything that would derail a coup d'etat. He then specifically says that we'd be saving all Pokemon nationwide, which opens an entire can of worms that I do not have the time to dwell upon. Ascending the radio tower brings us against Proton once more, who is simply ice-fanged into oblivion. Afterwards comes Ariana, and her accursed Arbok paralyzes Lapoyo. We dispatch of it simply enough, but this lingering paralysis hampers our efforts against her Vileplume. Lapoyo finishes the job, and we learn that our rival's snide behavior is in fact genetic. Entering the elevator, I am impressed to see that said platform can hold Mukbang's weight. At the top of the radio tower, we encounter the new boss of Team Rocket, Archer. He is determined to summon Giovanni, not knowing that he's likely out there living his best life at the PWT. The commenced battle starts with Mukbang sustaining a Fire Fang before using Milk Drink? He follows this up with Shadow Claw before focusing up with a critical Spike Cannon. An Ice Punch is landed against Houndoom, and Mukbang rests in the nick of time. He thankfully isn't flinched, and Sleep talks directly into self-destruct like the champ he is. The remainder of the conflict is a seesaw between Occam's and Coughing. Archer rather unceremoniously disbands Team Rocket, and our thanks for saving the nation is the Silver Wing. Afterwards, we are briefly interviewed, and then depart Goldenrod altogether for Route 44. We face increasingly exotic Pokemon here, but make it to the ice path with ease. This is probably my favorite cave in Johto, with the music being a particular joy. I truly didn't expect to see Cameron here, and after some finagling, we acquire the HM for Waterfall. I instantly teach it to Mizuchi for that glorious physical stab. We are, however, subjected to probably my least favorite puzzle from any Pokemon game. I genuinely hate this, and we finally get a decent physical stab for Occam's. We come across a stuck kimono girl, and I channel exactly 0.3% of the rage I feel from a Voltorb flip loss into a shove. Out the other side is Blackthorn City, an alpine burg that I quite enjoy the vibe of. Before I tackle its gym, I decide to sweep up the arduous Route 45. With its branching paths, it has to be combed through multiple times. In the adjoined dark cave, we acquire the black glasses for Occam's dark typing. On that topic, it is during a battle with a random hiker that Occam's gets muckbanged. And unlike the many coughing that attempted such before, this self-destruct proves to be most effective. In happier news, Lapoyo reaches her final form, the magnificent Blaziken, picking up the phenomenal Blaze Kick in the process. Freshly evolved, Lapoyo grants us the joy of the cutest interaction I have ever seen in this game. This 6'3" Kickin' Moa loves head pats. It is immensely satisfying to finally have a Blaziken after all this time. Best starter ever, I mean it, deal with it. With Route 45 cleaned up, we can now face Blackthorn's gym. We are advised to keep our Pokemon stored, and for good reason. I was joking about it before, but this Bowser's Castle of a gym is proof that safety guidelines are incredibly lax, if not non-existent in Johto. Every trainer in this gym is wielding either the Dratini or Seadra line, making them easy prey for Mizuchi. Damascus enjoys the frenzy as well, as we reach Claire and begin the battle. Things start poorly upon realizing that she has a Gyarados. I switch in Mizuchi, who narrowly bests her counterpart. In comes both Dragonair and Damascus, who successfully gets a Sandstorm going to avoid an incoming Dragon Pulse. He lands a beautiful crit and slashes her other Dragonair with ease. Her last Pokemon is Kingdra, and Damascus expertly dodges its Hydro Pump before retaliating. She then goes for Dragon Pulse, which obliterates my precious baby boy. The prerequisites are met, and Lanius is set in. Her Kingdra barely survives Dragon Claw, and she potions up. It is then that something happens. She goes for Dragon Pulse, sure to do a lot of damage, but he's tanked worse, and... Stop. Stop. Her Kingdra has an ability that powers up critical attacks. The Legate, in his first showing against a gym leader, is intervened against by fate itself. Nevertheless, we send in Muckbang, who avenges his humiliated brethren by dishing out Giga Impact. Despite the fact that she vanquished a legendary Pokemon, a truly astounding feat, Claire still crashes out over this loss. She concocts some scheme to invalidate this win, and we're sent out with no badge. Even though the squad got absolutely thrashed here, our worries aren't over yet. We are allowed entry into the mystical dragon den, though apparently no one told the occupants. Of course, a pecking order must be established here, and Damascus is all too happy to oblige. In a double battle involving Muckbang, I see something that I have never witnessed before. Muckbang rolls Egg Bomb and misses, and then immediately after rolls it again. What are the odds of this? I need to know. We are forced to use the worst HM ever and reach the inner sanctum. We are subjected to a flurry of questions that even a child could answer, which makes it all the more gobsmacking when Claire reveals that, apparently, she never passed this test. The Elder demands Claire give us the final badge, and she relents. And if I'm being honest, if my own grandfather insinuated that some random child was better than me, well, how do I say this? I'd pull a Muckbang. We exit the shrine, and Occam's commits property damage in our departure. Mother rolls a nat 20, buying us a highly coveted item, Muscle Band, that will benefit the entire team. Professor Elm summons us back to New Bark Town, giving us a Master Ball for our accolades. Evidently, word of our deeds has been spreading, and the Kimono girls wish to speak with us. As we approach the dance theater, Serbia is forcibly ejected, doing a Sinnoh reference in the process. He warns us about the trainers inside, and on that he is wise. This gauntlet of 5 kimono girls is no joke, as you can't heal in between their battles. The first has an Umbreon, which Lapoyo sorts out swiftly. The next is Espeon, which Occam's nearly one-shots before quick attacking. After is Flareon, which Lapoyo stays in for to entomb with ease. Following that is Jolteon, and initially Lapoyo looks to best this evolution as well, only for a vicious Thunderbolt and Paralysis to force a Muckbang switch. Jolteon keeps going for a double team and Muckbang misses revenge, only to roll Feint Attack which bypasses accuracy, the absolute maestro. The final one is Vaporeon, which Mizuchi spars with before cinching the dub. We receive the second key item required to summon Lugia, a tad bit excessive, and said legendary is evidently beginning to stir. The Kimono sisters clear out, giving us the perfect opportunity to groove. Lapoyo burns up the dance floor. while Mukbang puts Tierno's moves to shame. Mizuchi practices her future dragon dance, and Occams executes a flawless triple axel. We make way to the Whirl Islands and spend quite some time lost in its labyrinthian interior. Finally finding our destination, the Silverwing proceeds to hover most dramatically. Lugia's cavern is a genuinely cool visual, and the ensuing ritual to summon it is simply mesmerizing. Before we continue any further, I'd like to rewind just a little bit to right before we departed Cyanwood for this archipelago. The sequence of events that I am about to describe may seem utterly ludicrous, and looking back on them, indeed, they are. How the arcane wizards of yore first uncovered this magic is beyond me, but I will be utilizing it thoroughly in this playthrough. I started off by trading in 2 Shoutout, and gave them new cries via chatter. I then saved in front of Lugia, and temporarily set my DS' calendar to February 22nd, 2034, and the time to 9:21 AM. In-game, I took note of what routes both Raikou and Entei were currently on, and then, stay with me here, I called Juggler Irwin dozens of times. Afterwards, I spent several minutes alternating between both chat-out summaries, and if all went well, then... What you just witnessed was RNG manipulation at play, and I will be using it for every legendary in the game, with the exception of the roamers. I left the technical details out for comedic effect, but if you want a proper tutorial, I highly recommend this video. Anyway, yes, Lanius, to solidify his shininess, will battle every one of his fellow shiny legendaries in Soul Silver, starting with Lugia. Leonard Nimoy got quite close to shutting the Legate down, but a choice decision to use Rain Dance instead of anything else meant that Lanius succeeded in his first shiny hunt of the playthrough. As one would expect, the Kimono girls were, rather appalled at our course of action here. We twirled our way out of there and commenced what I like to call the cleanup. Basically, I combed through the entire region for any items, trainers, and areas that I missed the first time around. Some of these locations are truly strange, though I do get to encounter and battle a variety of Pokemon that I hadn't seen in such a way before. During this time, Mother buys us Focus Sash, which will be very useful for the later Battle Frontier. With the entire region thoroughly picked through, we head back to New Bark Town, refamiliarize ourselves with Elm's existence, and embark east. We quickly reach Kanto, and Lanius is delighted to have a whole new region to torment. Our first point of interest is Tojo Falls, where Lanius discovers a curious cave. Out on Route 27, Mukbang gets into a scuffle with a Magneton. He uses Charge Beam, a much more successful Rock Smash, and an utterly befuddling Splash. He gets critted, but survives on 3 HP to strike back. He successfully rests afterwards, and in the most surprising instance yet, self-destructs on a random Quagsire. We continue on despite the mayhem, and are tied up in battling a plethora of trainers every step of the way. We finally make it to the reception gate, and I am in awe at how low-key it all is. There is no grandiose speech by the professor, just, "Oh, you meet the requirements, good luck." If I'm being honest, the less that is said of Johto's Victory Road, the better. It is simply the worst one on account of 0 trainers, excluding the person waiting for us at the end, that is. The wild Pokemon here provide paltry EXP as well, making it a real pain to grind for the Elite Four. The silver lining is that we get Earthquake's TM here. At any rate, the end is reached, and who else but Serbia is there to thwart us? He talks a big game, and is even packing a full squad, but he makes the catastrophic mistake of sending out Sneasel first. Come on, I have one of these. I know its strengths and weaknesses, and know all too well how much a firefighting type hard counters it. We set up with ease, and proceed to systematically dismantle his entire team with just our starter. It honestly hurt to watch. Nevertheless, he takes this loss with grace, and joking aside, watching our rival's character arc over the course of this game is one of my favorite parts of it. We reach the spectacular Indigo Plateau, and before I tackle this grand challenge, it's time to grind. This shouldn't come as a shock, but having a pseudo, a fully evolved Snorlax, and a legendary on the same team out the gate means that the squad is overall underleveled in comparison to other playthroughs. How do I know? Well, back in late 2019 to early 2020, I played Heart Gold for the first time in years. I used an all-Sinnoh team. It was a fun gimmick, and in that playthrough, by the time I had reached the Elite Four, I already had a Garchomp. So, I used every venue I could. Trainer rematches, Victory Road grinding, and even the daycare. In that last part, I put both Mizuchi and Damascus in the daycare, and Mukbang was thoroughly concerned. I, should have heeded his worry, because it turns out they're both in a compatible egg group. Needless to say, I was horrified. I replaced Mizuchi with Lanius, though not before she learned Dragon Dance whilst in there. Unforeseen reproduction aside, I also completely crushed it at Voltorb Flip. This is when I saved before grinding. This was after grinding. Yeah, half of that was Voltorb Flip. The end result? We got the Swords Dance TM and the Metronome item. I gave Swords Dance to Occam's on account of him still being unevolved this late into the game, while Metronome will be given to any would-be sweeper. After getting the entire team to level 44, we are faced with a dilemma. I had exactly 6 rare candies and could therefore get each member to level 45. Or I could give 4 to Damascus for the Garchomp Evo. I went with the latter, because merely having a Gabite for Lance was not going to cut it. I therefore gave the remaining 2 to Mukbang and Lanius respectfully. Afterwards, I tracked down Cameron, and we took an epic photo before the upcoming Crucible. Each team member is now primed and ready for the Elite Four. Our first Elite Four member is Will, and as someone who played Pokemon Stadium as my first ever Pokemon game, Lorelei not being in the Johto games whatsoever is simply criminal. With Swords Dance, our unevolved Kamaitachi unleashes a glorious sweep, something that has been a rarity in this playthrough thus far. Up next is Koga, a pleasant addition to the Elite Four and a sign that even gym leaders can engage in upward mobility. This time around, the planned sweep faces some hiccups. His area dose lands a critical hit, putting us in the yellow. Worse still, his Crobat gets an evasion boost and tanks a blaze kick. It then goes for wing attack, and my heart nearly stops. Be glad that you can't hear the in-game audio, because this was the stimuli I was subjected to. On a terrifying sliver of HP, Lapoyo cautiously clears the rest of Koga's team, landing a crit on his Muck in the process. You did good, but please don't scare me like that again. We then face Mr. Street Fighter himself, Bruno. Now, if the prior battle against Will was flawless, and the battle against Koga was bumpy, then the battle against Bruno was downright dumbfounding. I go for Dragon Dance, as one does with Gyarados, and his Hitmontop a quick attack. I repeat my action, but he then keeps using counter. This is what we call setup fodder, as his Hitmontop can do nothing in the face of my Schmooving Serpent. In just 3 boosts, Bruno's team is brought to ruin. Our final Elite Four member is Karen, and I think this should be simple enough. We get 2 boosts off, and her Umbreon double teams once. We subsequently miss double kick and are then confused. Lapoyo clutches up and wrecks both her Umbreon and Murkrow. This Dark-type user has a Gengar for some reason, and wallops us with an excruciating Focus Blast. Lapoyo fires back with Shadow Claw and blaze kicks her Vileplume. She sends in Houndoom, and it is here that I forget something that may seem trivial. Lapoyo obviously doesn't have the hidden ability Speed Boost. Lapoyo is way slower than my mental perception of modern Blaziken. Lapoyo suffers due to my hubris. Yeah, turns out Houndoom is actually quite fast. Mizuchi finishes the job, and Karen hits us with her now iconic speech. I know some folks may think it is overplayed, but I resonate with her words 100%. At long last, it is time for the battle with Lance. I personally find him to be the most daunting champion to face, even more so than Cynthia or Steven. He gives a hype speech, and then we begin. Things start off with a good old-fashioned mirror match, and my plan is simple. Set up to the best of my ability against his Gyarados, and then use Metronome-powered Ice Fang to trounce his team. Things start good enough, with his Dragon Pulse doing minimal damage, and Ice Fang set to do more each turn. On the first attack, he gets frozen, only to thaw instantly. We Ice Fang again, and he gets frozen again. He uses a full restore, the first of many mind you, but it's a lost cause. The Metronome train is well underway now. With 1 of 6 down, I am pleased to announce that the rest of the battle went smoothly. He sends in Aerodactyl. Mizuchi uses Ice Fang. Mizuchi misses Ice Fang. Mizuchi misses Oh. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. This is not good. With my plan for a sweep trashed, I fall back on Mukbang. He dodges an incoming Rock Slide and rolls a multi-hitter that crits twice and lands for the maximum amount. He then dodges another rock slide, oh my god, but goes for cut. Mukbang's luck takes a turn, however, as he is then flinched twice, and barely manages to rest at just 10 HP. He doesn't flinch after that, and does what he does best, taking out that dreaded Aerodactyl. Damascus is up next, and with a combined Sandstorm and Bright Powder, he manages to evade Outrage. He lands a Dragon Claw, triggering a Citrus Berry in the process, and then dodges another Outrage. Lance's first Dragonite is down, but we've got 2 more to go. Damascus dodges a third attack, while Sandstorm forces another full restore. He uses a third full restore because of course he does, and in the process our Sandstorm subsides. Damascus then takes out Dragonite number 2, and in comes his third. He gets it down to red, and it goes for Blizzard, which lands, and I'm like, maybe he can survive it, but no. Damascus is out. Knowing that this Psycho has a 4th full restore, which he uses, Occam's goes for Avalanche, which only barely didn't KO, before Feint Attack does it in. His final Pokemon is Charizard, and at this point, Occam stays in to do some chip damage. He gets hit by Fire Fang, survives, but gets burned, which takes him out. It's at this point that I regret getting rid of Rock Tomb for Lapoyo, as Charizard uses an Air Slash that is retaliated with Shadow Claw. He then uses his own Shadow Claw, which is more sufficient than our own. It has come down to Lanius, who ends this entire Maelstrom with a Dragon Claw. That... I gotta walk away after that one. Lance accepts his defeat with grace, but we are interrupted, not by Elm, but by Oak, and we are then whisked away to a silent chamber. Lance continues his grand gesture of passing the torch, seriously what a good man, and the team is then inducted into the Hall of Fame. We have done it. We became champion. If you haven't guessed by now, this video is a part 1 of a 2-part series. It was my initial intention to have everything up to red be one video, but this project grew to such an extent that said goal simply wasn't feasible. The good news is that I was initially editing the entire thing as one video, so part 2 should be out far faster than this video was. I would like to thank you all for having patience while I edited this. It, was a lot more than I anticipated, that's for sure. There were a fair share of hiccups and delays. Heck, I had to buy a laptop just to edit this thing, as my dinosaur of a PC wasn't fit for the task. If you enjoyed this video, then do consider subscribing. Once part 2 is out, it is my intention to be uploading a lot more to make up for the months-long hiatus this video entailed. A massive thank you to Minty CMX for my thumbnails. That is all I have for you today. Thank you for your time.